Hi there. In this video we'll be covering how long does it take to self-publish a book. Good things take time, and a good book is going to take time too. I've worked on books that have taken a decade to finish, and I've worked on other books that have taken just a couple months. Let's consider how long it really takes to bring a self-published book to life. By the end of this video, you'll learn why working with professionals could save you lots and lots of time, the biggest variable to getting your book completed, and why you want to build up to publication day. And stay tuned until the end of the video for an opportunity I really think you're going to enjoy. Let's dive in. When you think about the length of time it takes to bring a self-published book to life, the writing process is the most time-consuming, but it can also be the most rewarding, and it can set you up for other areas in the pathway to publication. It really depends. It really depends on the type of book you're writing. It depends on how difficult it is, how challenging it is. If your book is all about your own experiences and getting your stories out of your head and onto the page, that's a relatively easy book to write. If you require research and interviews and other things, it's going to take time. More and more time. It's really interesting looking at the time element, because I've written books in 6 weeks, I've written books in 6 months, and I've written books in years and years and years. When I think about the books that have gone quickly, they're ghostwriting projects. So I'm writing, I'm doing the writing for the author. I'm working with them, I'm collaborating with them, we're meeting weekly. I think about the focus that I had in helping them to stay on track. We did some planning work, we figured out what we wanted to do, accomplish with the book, and then we got to writing. And we were making consistent progress week after week. When I think about those projects, you can write a 30,000 word draft in a couple months. It's not that hard. It's focus driven, but it's not that hard. The fastest I've ever written a draft was a 50,000 word manuscript in 6 weeks. That was a little too fast. I was proud of the book, but it was a little too fast. You want to make sure that you take the time to get it right. And if you're rushing and going that fast, you're liable to miss something, to overlook something. You're liable to rush, to cut corners, and you don't want to do that. You want to get this right. At the same time, other books take years and years because they require outside research. So if it's all about you and your story and your message and your lessons, and it's a relatively easy book to write, there's no reason why you couldn't write it in a couple months, at least 3 to 6 months, maybe 8 months, maybe 12 months. I mean, that's still a good rate. It's still a good rate to say you wrote a draft of a book in a year. That's awesome. So the writing is the biggest variable, but it offers the most rewards because of the fact that by doing the work in the writing process, you're going to make everything else easier. That's why a lot of times people work with ghostwriters like me to help them with their book. It's not so much that they can't write. A lot of them are great at writing, but they want to make consistent, efficient progress. If you're running a company, you probably don't have a lot of free time to be able to devote to writing. That's why people work with writers like me. I help bring the stories out of them, in hour-long weekly meetings, and then I take those conversations and turn them into chapters. And it's really empowering to see the book come together. People who don't work with professionals, whether ghostwriters or writing coaches, it's liable to take longer. So it really depends on what you're able to put into it. And when you can find people and work with people, that can do the work in tandem with you and help to bring out your story in the best way possible. If you're working with professionals, it's like a force multiplier. It's exponential progress. You can run your company, focus on your family, and still write your book. Instead of thinking, oh my gosh, I have to devote all weekend to this. I don't have time. I'm too busy. It takes the busy element out of it. If you have an hour a week, you can write a book in 3 months or 6 months. If it's straightforward. Obviously, again, research, it'll take longer. The next step when you have a draft is editing and production. Editing is a struggle. Editing is a challenge. You want to be challenged in the editing process. If you're not being challenged in the editing process, it means you have the wrong editor in place. They are taking it too easy on your book. They're not challenging or questioning things. No draft is perfect. Every single draft can be just a little bit stronger, tightened, improved, changed. There's something you're going to miss or get wrong, inevitably. If you're writing a book worth reading, there's something you can improve. And editing comes through in 3 different steps. Sometimes not all authors follow all 3 steps, but I want to explore them and share them with you. The first is content or developmental editing. That's a 30,000-foot view. That's story structure, that's flow, that's making sure everything fits together. The next step is copy editing. That's at the sentence and paragraph level. It's making sure that the word choice is right, the style's right. Something was spelled the same way in page 25 and 75. So that's copy editing. And the next layer down is proofreading, and that's really the catch-all. That's the safety net of anything you missed. Those 3 rounds of editing work together to create a great book. And they're all looking at different things, and you want different people looking at them for different rounds, not the same person again and again, or not yourself, You want to work with people who understand how to edit for books and how to bring out the power in a book. What's interesting about the editing process is that if you've done the hard work in the writing phase, the editing is going to be relatively easy. Even if you have some things that kick back and change, it's going to be relatively easy, whereas if you haven't done the work, this is where the problems are going to emerge. This is where you're going to see longer lag times. Things are going to take longer, because now the editor has questions. Now there's things that you really need to fix in this draft to make it better, to make it ready to publish. So trying to speed ahead in the writing phase could come back to haunt you in the editing phase. So you want to spend the time to get it right first in the writing phase, and the editing process is going to be that much easier. Production is really about layout design. What does this book look like? How is it to hold, to read on an e-reader? You want this book to be engaging, and your layout and your design is a way to do that. What are the little flourishes and elements that make this special? Yes, you can go simple. Yes, you can do something on Canva. But for argument's sake, let's talk about really, really, really diving deep on the layout process. Let's talk about working with a professional, working with a designer. With the editing side, it's probably a couple months of editing, depending on the rounds that you pursue. And with the design side, it's probably at least a month for layout. You want to work with somebody who's going to spend the time to do it right, and a lot of times people will rush, but there's little flourishes and little elements that can really just make that layout pop. When you pick up a well-designed book, you can tell from the cover, you can tell to any page that you flip to, this book is special, this book is worth reading, this book is different. You want the design and the layout to match the awesome story that you're telling. Otherwise, it's going to be like a really powerful engine in a junky car. That's what it's going to feel like. If you kind of cut corners on the production side, that's what it's going to feel like. This thing is too powerful, and yet you look on the outside, it's dented, it's rusted. I don't know, I don't know if I trust this. You want this engine to be in a great car, and you want this thing to really shine and stand out and look awesome. You want the reader to know from the moment that they pick it up that this is a special book. This is a different book. This book is going to be worth reading, Anything that you can do to create engagement with that is great. And I think it's worth spending the time, both in the editing and the production phases, to make sure that this manuscript, this draft, this book is as strong as possible. Next comes the upload and planning phase. These are relatively straightforward, but it's just worth spending a moment to think about. Where do you want this book to appear? How do you want it to be sold? Is it on your website? Is it on Amazon? Is it on a different website? Does it appear in bookstores and libraries? There's all of these different levers that you can pull to make sure that your book appears in more and more places. So you want to think about that. Do you want to do a Goodreads giveaway? Do you want to offer free copies somewhere? Do you want to try to pitch for media opportunities? There's all of these different levers that you can pull and all these opportunities that can open. So you want to spend the time to think about these things. The upload stage, that preparation work, it's not a huge lift. It just requires some thought to think about where you want this book to appear. The build up to publication is important, and I always like to think about the pre-sale period as a great window. This is the window that you have to ramp up. This is the runway you have to build engagement, to get people excited about the book, to want to read it. You can capture pre-sales on Amazon, for example, and really drive interest and visibility and attention to the book before it comes out. and into publication day. It's super exciting when you can do that. It's super special when you can do that. You know, there's arguments to be said that if you don't have a big platform or you're not interested in the marketing promotional side of it, that you can just publish the book. Yeah, you know, that's definitely true, but I ultimately think even some runway is a good runway, even a couple weeks, you know. Give it some space, give it some attention, give it some visibility, give it some love. You know, you spend some time on this book, you spend some effort on this book, you know, make sure it resonates. Publication day is not the end. Publication day is the beginning. It's the beginning of a new start. It's the beginning of a new you. It's the beginning of whatever lies ahead. Publication day is a super exciting time. It's a time to take that victory lap. Your book is out. People are reading it. Hopefully they're liking it. If you've done the work and taken the time to do the things properly, the writing and the editing phases, specifically the design work, your book is going to be well received. You know, you really need to spend the time on it because this is gut check time. This is where the rubber meets the road. This is where all those opportunities and efforts are going to coalesce. You know, so you really want to make sure that you've done the work because ultimately it's time to show, you know, take the test, show your work, show your answers. People are going to see if you got it right or not, you know, and they're going to let you know in comments, in votes, in everything else. So there's this public switch that gets turned on and now people are reading the book. Your book is just the beginning. Your publication day is just the beginning. You know, ultimately your book could be a sales and marketing platform for you for years to come. So publication day isn't just this end of like, oh, we're going to promote the book for 2 weeks and that's it. No, this is the start. This is a start of a brand new beginning, and it's super exciting to be able to take that step in empowerment, in power, in progress, to be able to take that step and move forward and see your book, you know, see your book launch, see your book be so well received. Once you've done all that work to get it right, it's going to make everything else that much easier, and then you can just build on it from there. You can get some wins, some visibility, some gains, some media attention, and next thing you know, this thing is taking off. But again, it really depends on the type of book you're writing. It depends on the amount of writing you need, the type of effort you need to bring it forward, and making sure to take the time on all these different steps to make sure the draft is as strong as possible before advancing to the next gate. If you want to learn more about how long does it take to self-publish a book, you'll definitely want to watch another video I recorded. I'll link to it on the screen. It's called I Need Help to Write My Book. You know, in that video, I covered the main support services available to authors today: book ghostwriting, writing coaching, courses, you know, DIY tips. Whatever path you want to choose, whether going it alone or working with someone, that's definitely a video you want to check out. Remember, a good book can change your life. I'm Dan Good. Thanks for watching.